So let us start here with the next part, children. I will tell him. What you say, Hannah replied courteously. So, children, as you have seen in the previous part, that the servants were really not happy at the idea of giving shelter to a prisoner of war. Already you have seen that there was a gardener and he had started pulling up the few hair on the upper part of his lips. That means that he had started just pulling out his mustaches on account of his irritation. So, in this way, overall, you can understand that the reaction was not fair on the part of the servants. So when in his angry tone he had conveyed it to Hannah that it is really not a good thing that Dr. Sadav has been giving treatment, that Dr. Sadav has been trying to heal up an enemy. Hannah said courteously. Courteously means with a politeness. Very politely Hannah replied to him that she is going to convey the matter to Dr. Sadav. So why is this politeness here? That you can understand, children, that the servants had been working there in the family for a very long time. Some of the servants had been there in the family even from the time when Dr. Sadav himself was a kid. So, even though they were servants, but as per the tradition, generally it is supposed that the old servants must also be given the respect कि हम लोग अपने घरों में भी जो काम करने वाले होते हैं, घरों में भी जो नौकर चाकर होते हैं, उनको भी चाची या इस तरीके से कुछ ना कुछ एड्रेस करके उनको हम जनरली बाय नेम नहीं पुकारते हैं, उनको हम कुछ ना कुछ जो है चाची वगैरह कह करके या जो है भैया वगैरह कह करके ही काम चलाते हैं. तो ये एक कर्टेसी है. तो इसी तरीके से एक कर्टेसी को ऑब्जर्व करते हुए हाना ने कहा कि मैं डॉक्टर सदाव को बता दूंगी. बट शी हरसेल्फ वॉज ऑल्सो फ्राइटेंड ऑल्दो शी वॉज नॉट सुपरस्टिशियस एज द ओल्ड मैन वॉज. सो डेफिनेटली एवरीबडी हैड बीन fearful there. What you have been told, but she herself was also frightened. That Hannah was also quite frightened. Hannah was also not in a relaxed mind. She was also very much in tension because they never knew what was going to happen next. And whatever they had been doing was really against the law of the country. So what you have been told here that she was not superstitious as the servant was means she was not thinking कि हाँ वो समुद्र बदला लेने के लिए आ जाएगा या बंदूक की गोली बदला लेने के लिए आ जाएगी, ये सब वो नहीं सोच रही थी. Yet you can understand that she was frightened because the situation was really quite dangerous for them. Could it ever be well to help an enemy? So that was the question that had been lingering up in the mind of Hannah. Whether it is ever going to be good to help an enemy, कि क्या दुश्मन की मदद करना कभी भी अच्छा होता है तो वो दुश्मन ही, बस चले तो वही इनको मार करके भाग जाए तो इसमें भी कोई बड़ी बात नहीं है. Nevertheless, she told Yumi to fetch hot water and bring it to the room where the white man was. So in spite of all these things, she had been busy thinking about her own difficulties. Yet she ordered Yumi that Yumi should be coming to the room where the man was with a bucket of water. उसने Yumi को इन सारी टेंशन और सारी डिफिकल्टीज के बावजूद भी उसने Yumi को ये कहा कि वो बाल्टी लेकर के, वो बकेट लेकर के उस रूम में आए जहां पर वो व्हाइट मैन है. तो मेरे ख्याल से इतनी बात आपने समझ ली होगी बच्चों. She went ahead and slid back the partitions. So children, what you have been told here? That Hannah and Yumi had been coming to the room where the prisoner of war was. So Hannah was ahead of Yumi. So Hannah just slid back the partitions. It was the partition of the door. Hannah just slid back the partition to open the door. Sada was not there. So by the time Hannah reached into the room, Dr. Sada was not there. जब Hannah वहाँ पे पहुंची और उसने ऐसे दरवाजा खिसका करके खोला तो Dr. Sada was not there. Yumi following put down her wooden bucket. So Yumi was just following Hannah and she reached there and put down the bucket. वहाँ पहुँच करके उसने उस बाल्टी को रख दिया, जो गर्म पानी की बाल्टी थी उसको उसने वहाँ पर रख दिया. Then she went over to the white man and then she just gazed at the white man. Earlier she was also not informed of the fact that this was a white man. So as soon as she saw that there was an American over there, she was also full of anger. She was also going to react in a very different way कि जैसे ही उसको ये समझ में आया कि अरे ये आदमी तो जो है ये एक अमेरिकन है, ये एक दुश्मन है, तो उसकी भी टोन बदल गई, उसका भी टेम्परामेंट बदल गया, उसकी भी बॉडी लैंग्वेज बदल गई. When she saw him, her thick lips folded themselves into stubbornness. So as soon as Yumi realized that the person was an American, her thick lips folded themselves into stubbornness. Means somewhat this kind of a gesture she made. Means it was a gesture of rejection. Her thick lips folded themselves into stubbornness. Stubbornness का मतलब कि जिसको जिद बोलते हैं. तो there was a kind of rigidness in the temperament of Yumi. She became rigid that she is not going to do it, and her lips were folded into stubbornness like this. I have never watched a white man, she said. So what she said? That she has neither ever watched a white man nor she is going to do it this time. कि वो किसी गैर मर्द को नहीं नहलाएगी, ये बात उसने कहा. उसने अपनी वही उसी वाली टोन में, जैसे कि जो देहाती लोग बोलते हैं, तो वैसे ही उसने कहा होगा कि मैं इसको नहीं छुएगी, अगर मैं इसको छुएगी तो मेरा मर्द मुझे मारेगा. तो समवट लाइक दैट शी मस्ट हैव रिएक्टेड. शी सेड दैट शी हैज नेवर वॉच्ड अ व्हाइट मैन नॉर शी इज गोइंग टू डू इट दिस टाइम. I will not wash so dirty a one now. So ultimately she refused that she is not going to do the job. कि उसने मारे गुस्से के ये कह दिया कि वो नहीं करेगी, और अंत में उसने नहीं ही किया. Hannah cried at her severely. You will do what your master commands you. So children, in this way you can understand that at the reaction of Yumi, Hannah was also angry. Hannah was also not able to digest the reaction of Yumi, because Hannah was herself the mistress of the house. She was the landlady, she was the house lady, and she was not in the habit of tolerating the stubbornness of servants. So that is why she also became angry. And what she said, you will do what your master commands you. कि तुमको करना ही होगा जो तुम्हारे मालिक तुमसे कहते हैं, क्योंकि हम ही तुमको सैलरी देते हैं, तो जो हम कहेंगे वो तुमको करना होगा. That is how she reacted initially. But then she realized that the situation is really not fine here. There was so fierce a look of resistance upon Yumi's dull round face that Hannah felt unreasonably afraid. So children, what you have been told here next, that there was so fierce a look of resistance, that there was a look of resistance, there was a kind of resistance, or there was a kind of rigidity on the face of Hannah, on the face of Yumi, कि Yumi के चेहरे पर एक तरीके का resistance था, और ये resistance इतना strong resistance था कि Hannah को भी डर लग गया एक बार. There was so fierce a look of resistance upon Yumi's round dull face. So Yumi had got a round dull face. इस तरीके से तो जापानीज चाइनीज जैसे वो राउंड राउंड होते भी हैं, तो वैसा राउंड डल फेस, मरिल्ला सा चेहरा उसका था, और उस पर एक तरीके का ऐसा रिजिडनेस, ऐसा गुस्सा जैसा उसके चेहरे पर था. तो दैट हाना फेल्ट अनरीजनेबली अफ्रेड. So it was that kind of an expression on the face of Yumi that Hannah had also become unreasonably afraid. Hannah had started thinking that if the servants went and reported the things, definitely they are going to be in danger. तो इनको अभी बहुत ज़्यादा नाराज ना करो. So after all, if the servants should report something that was not as it had happened, so they were fearful. They means especially Hannah was fearful that if the servants went and reported something to the police that was not as it had happened, कि अगर सर्वेंट्स गए, उन्होंने शिकायत कर दी, और जब वाजिब सी बात है, ये लाजमी सी बात है कि अगर शिकायत कोई करेगा तो वो शिकायत में वास्तविक प्रॉब्लम की शिकायत नहीं करेगा, बल्कि शिकायत को बढ़ा चढ़ा करके ही करेगा. तो अगर उन्होंने कुछ ऐसी चीज जाकर के रिपोर्ट की जो कि वास्तव में नहीं था, तो देन डेफिनेटली इट वुड हैव बीन अ प्रॉब्लमेटिक सिचुएशन. वेरी वेल, शी सेड विद डिग्निटी. सो अल्टीमेटली Hannah had to change her own temperament. Hannah had to change her own tone and body language. And now she behaved with dignity. कि चलो चलो ठीक है, कोई बात नहीं, तुम्हें नहीं करना है, ठीक है, जाओ, तुम आराम से अपना काम करो, हम कर देंगे, don't worry. You understand that we only want to bring him to his senses so that we can turn him over as prisoner. So Hannah tried to explain it to Yumi that we are just giving the treatment because he has to be recovered from his ailment, he has to be recovered from his sickness, and then ultimately he is going to be given back to the army. तो हाना ने उसको ये समझाने की कोशिश की कि हम सिर्फ इसको होश में लाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि ताकि हम इसको पुलिस के हवाले कर दें. तो ये बात आपने देखी यहां पर. I will have nothing to do with it, Yumi said. I am a poor person and it is not my business. So in this way, children, you can see that Yumi entirely rejected whatever she had been ordered for. She entirely just denied whatever she had been ordered for. She said that she is a poor woman and this is not her business to give a bath to strangers. कि वो दूसरों को नहलाने के लिए नौकरी नहीं करती है, वो बच्चों को पालने की नौकरी करती है और वो अपनी नौकरी के अलावा दूसरा काम नहीं करेगी. I will have nothing to do with it. उसने साफ साफ कह दिया कि मेरा इससे कोई सरोकार नहीं है कि ये कौन है, क्या है, आप इसको क्यों ठीक कर रहे हैं, इन बातों से मेरा कोई कनेक्शन नहीं है. आई हैव नथिंग टू डू विद ऑल दीज थिंग्स एंड दिस इज एंटायरली नॉट माई बिजनेस. आई एम अ पुअर पर्सन एंड इट डज नॉट मीन दैट आई एम गोइंग टू डू एनीथिंग फॉर सेक ऑफ मनी, कि मैं कुछ भी नहीं कर सकती हूँ. देन प्लीज, हाना सेड जेंटली, रिटर्न टू योर ओन वर्क. सो इन दिस वे अल्टीमेटली शी वाज जस्ट asked to go back to her own work. At once Yumi left the room. So just on account of her anger, Yumi left the room at once. तुरंत वो वहाँ से चली गई. But this left Hana with the white man alone. So now Hana had been left with the white man alone. And although she just disliked the white man, earlier she did not want to stay with the white man in any way, even though he was unconscious. लेकिन अब Hana अकेली उस white man के साथ में वहाँ पर छूट गई. She might have been too afraid to stay. So definitely she might have been too afraid to stay, कि वो बहुत डरी हुई थी और वो वहाँ पर न रुकती. लेकिन कुछ ऐसा था कि जिसकी वजह से उसे वहाँ रुकना पड़ा. तो वो क्या था देखिए. She might have been too afraid to stay had not her anger at Yumi's stubbornness now sustained her. So means if it had not been her anger, if it would not have been her anger on Yumi, definitely she would not have sustained herself there. So it was the anger on Yumi that sustained her there. कि जो यूमी के प्रति उसका गुस्सा था, उस गुस्से ने उसको हाना को वहां पे रोके रखा था. अदरवाइज शी वुड हैव गॉन अवे फ्रॉम देयर, कि वो वहां रुकती नहीं उस स्ट्रेंजर के साथ में, भले ही वो जो है बेहोश पड़ा हुआ था, वो वहां से चली गई होती. लेकिन उसका जो गुस्सा था यूमी पे, उस गुस्से ने उसको रोके रखा. सस्टेन मतलब कि रोके रखा, और उसी को अंत में उसको नहलाना पड़ा. हाना को ही उसे अंत में वॉश करना पड़ा. With Yumi, she muttered fiercely. So Hana was really very angry. She said that Yumi is really stupid. Yumi is really a very silly girl. Yumi is really a very silly woman. Is this anything but a man? कि क्या ये इंसान नहीं है? ये एनिमी है तो क्या ये इंसान नहीं है? Is this anything but a man? Is he not a man? And a wounded helpless man. And on the top of it, he is a wounded helpless man. कि ये घायल पड़ा हुआ असहाय आदमी है. क्या इसकी मदद करने में कोई बुराई है? And then, in the conviction of her own superiority, she bent impulsively. Impulsively means reactantly, as a reaction. कि जैसे आपको कोई कुछ कह दे और आप हमारे गुस्से के वहां से तंतना करके चल दीजिए, तो that is called impulsive action. So impulsively, she just bent down. She just knelt down. वो झुकी. In the conviction of her own superiority. In the conviction of her own superiority means in the thought of her own superiority. कि क्या तुम नहीं करोगे तो कोई काम करने वाला नहीं मिलेगा. तो जैसे कि ऐसा कह दिया जाता है कि अच्छा क्या तुम ये बात नहीं सुनोगे तो क्या मेरा कोई काम करने वाला नहीं मिलेगा. तो इस तरीके से ही दैट इज व्हाट इज कॉल्ड एज द कन्विक्शन ऑफ सुपीरियोरिटी, कि हाँ तुम ही अकेले नहीं हो. तो दैट इज व्हाट हाना वांटेड टू से हियर. So in the conviction of her own superiority, she bent impulsively and untied the knotted rugs. She just bent down, she just knelt down, and she started untying. She started opening the rugs. She started removing the clothes of that person. She started removing the clothes of that prisoner of war. So what have you been told here? She started untying the rugs that kept the white man covered. She started removing the clothes that were covering the prisoner of war. कि उसने उसके कपड़े उतारने शुरू किए उसको नहलाने के लिए. When she had his breast bare, she dipped the small clean towel that Yumi had brought into steaming hot water and washed his face carefully. So in this way the chest of the person was opened, and now she just dipped a clean towel into the steaming hot water, and then she started rubbing the chest and the face of that prisoner. She started rubbing the face and chest of the prisoner. कि उसके जब उसने उसके कपड़े उतारे तो अब उसका सीना खुला हुआ था उस prisoner of war का, और उसके सीने को उसने रगड़ रगड़ करके गर्म पानी में भीगी हुई तौलिया से पोंछा, और उसका चेहरा और उसका जो फ्रंट पोर्शन बॉडी का था उसको उसने साफ किया. So that is what you have been told here. Just pay attention. The man's skin, though rough with exposure. So the skin of the man, however, it was rough with exposure. Rough with exposure, the person had been in captivity, he must have been in sun, he must have been exposed to rain. So in this way, definitely the person was not having an exposure to a good atmosphere. So that is why the beauty of his skin, that is why the impression of his skin had been marred. But what you have been told here, the man's skin, though rough with exposure, that the skin of the man had been rough with exposure. Exposure means exposure to sun and heat and rain, was a fine texture. So definitely the original texture, definitely the original color and complexion of the skin was very fine, and must have been very blonde when he was a child. So the person must have been very blonde, he would have been yellowish, he would have been फेयर कलर्ड व्हेन ही वाज अ चाइल्ड। तो हाना ने जब उसकी बॉडी को रगड़ना, उसकी बॉडी को पोंछना शुरू किया तो उसको ये चीज़ समझ में आई कि एक्सपोजर की वजह से, धूप छांव बरसात को बर्दाश्त करने की वजह से इसकी स्किन खराब हो गई है, लेकिन इसकी स्किन का टेक्सचर जो है वो बहुत ही फाइन है, बहुत ही ये सुंदर, देखने में खूबसूरत आदमी है। ऐसा हाना ने महसूस किया कि जरूर बचपन में इसकी स्किन काफ़ी ब्लॉन्ड, काफ़ी फेयर रही होगी। ये बात हाना ने सोची जब वो उसको साफ करने लगी। While she was thinking these thoughts, so children, this line is connected to the lines that has been given later on. While she was thinking these thoughts, she kept on washing him until his upper body was quite clean. So this is how the connection is. While she was thinking these thoughts, she kept on washing him until his upper body was quite clean. So means Hana was lost into this kind of a meditation. Hana was lost into this kind of a thinking, and in the meantime she was cleaning the body of the person. So while Hana had been thinking about the person, there was else something that had been going on in her mind. So what is that? Just see. Though not really liking the man better, now that he was no longer a child. So there wasn't anything as such that Hana had been impressed by the appearance of the person. There wasn't anything as such. The impression of the person had not appealed to Hana in that way. कि ऐसा नहीं था कि हाना को वो बड़ा पसंद आ गया था और हाना बहुत उससे इम्प्रेस हो गई थी. Though not really liking the man better, means she hadn't got any kind of liking for that person. Why? Because or now that he was no longer a child, क्योंकि अब वो कोई बच्चा नहीं था, और किसी मैरिड वुमन के लिए किसी दूसरे पर्सन को अप्रिशिएट करना तो दैट इज ऑल्सो नॉट ट्रेडिशनली गुड. सो देयर वॉजंट एनीथिंग एज सच दैट हाना हैड स्टार्टेड गेटिंग इम्प्रेस्ड बाय द अपीयरेंस ऑफ दैट पर्सन. She was only doing her duty and she kept on washing the person until his upper body was quite clean. But she dared not turn him over. But as Hana was a lady, she dared not turn him over. She dared not overturn him. कि उसकी पीछे की साइड जहाँ पे गोली लगी हुई थी उस तरफ उसको वो पलटने की हिम्मत नहीं दिखा पा रही थी. Where was Sadao? And now she was just worried about Dr. Sadao कि अरे ये कहाँ चले गए, डॉक्टर सदाओ कहाँ चले गए. Now her anger was ebbing, and just on account of irritation, on account of the complications of this situation, her anger was ebbing. कि कई बार ऐसी परिस्थिति हो जाती है, ऐसी मनोस्थिति हो जाती है कि बिना किसी बात की गुस्सा लगने लगती है. तो वैसा ही उसके साथ में भी हो रहा था कि हाना was ebbing with anger. She was really just getting filled up with anger. कि गुस्से से वो भरी जा रही थी. And she was anxious again, and she rose and wiping her hands on the wrong towel. So just in her anger she stood up and by mistake she wiped her hands on the wrong towel. कि जो उसके लिए आई थी उस टॉवेल में उसने अपना हाथ पोंछ लिया, अपना गंदा हाथ पोंछ लिया. Then lest the man be chilled, she put the quilt over him. So lest का मतलब कि कहीं ऐसा ना हो कि कहीं उस आदमी को ठंड न लग जाए, इसलिए उसने उसको रजाई उड़ा दी. तो इतनी बात आपने देख ली होगी. तो अभी आपने देखा कि अभी ऑपरेशन शुरू नहीं हुआ है, बस ऑपरेशन अब शुरू होने वाला है.